And particularly, I want to thank Dr. Dion, who has done most of the work in putting together some kind of a story of things that I'm supposed to have done. I wish now to thank all of you for coming to share the honor that the Law Society is bestowing upon me. And I also wish to thank my wife, Joan, for attending. And I thank especially many of my law school friends. Oh yes, I should tell you, my mother told me that I was born on the 10th of April in 1927. So some of you with rapid calculations I feel that I am in my 80s. When I was growing up, I never thought I would reach this age. And now that I am half, and you wonderful people are here to share my honor, and I feel that the Law Society has put together a story that makes me believe that life has been worth living. So, Dr. Tina, will you please tell the Law Society how much I appreciate the honor, and so I think I've reached the few words. I thank you again all for coming. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm going to invite Elizabeth Hunt and Chief Ed John to come up. Oh, to take a picture. Yes. To come up, and they're going to share some of their personal story about the legal path that they've taken and where it's taken them. But before we do that, I do want to just bring Tina Dion back up again for a second. There's an important announcement that she wanted to make that didn't have a room during her description of Judge Scow. So Tina Dion, if you could come back up for a second.
Thank you, Duncan. I wanted just to draw to your attention the mark your calendar, save the date card that's left on each of your chairs. I'm the chair of the Aboriginal Law Students Scholarship Trust Committee. What we're doing is raising funds, and Marvin Sturrow is present here today. He was part of the inaugural committee. I'm part of the second committee. What we're doing is raising $500,000 towards scholarships for Aboriginal students attending either UBC or University of Victoria Law Schools. September 30th, we are having a gala fundraising event at the Sheraton Walls Centre Hotel, and we'd invite you to look forward to further information coming out, and certainly to buy a ticket or a table and or make donations to the cause. So I just wanted to make that last comment, and thank you very much for allowing me to do that.
It's an important cause. Get out your checkbooks. You too can help a starving Aboriginal law student. So we're here to talk about, as I said before, a few of the secrets that these two very esteemed folks have with regard to their legal education, their legal careers, and being Aboriginal folks in that. In the legal community and the way they bridge the two, sometimes the divide between the two communities. I first interviewed Chief Ed John, did a TV interview with him about a dozen years ago. I was fresh out of law school, cub reporter with the CBC. I had a braid halfway down my back, and I was there to talk to him about the treaty process at the time. And I wasn't terribly delicate with my questioning. I said, you know, First Nations have borrowed $100 million. And where exactly is all that, and what have you achieved with it? And Ed and I have gotten along famously ever since. Time flows by, and 12 years later, my hair is much shorter. I suspect that $100 million figure is a little bit higher now. We do have two treaties, but Ed is still the chief of the executive of the First Nations Summit. He just informed me that this is his 10th term that he's just recently been elected to. His political longevity is simply quite remarkable, and I think it's because he commands respect amongst a broad range of groups, amongst First Nations, both politically, amongst chiefs, but also at a grassroots level, with the BC government, with industry. He travels the world speaking about Indigenous rights and just works endlessly on behalf of First Nations peoples. So I'd like you to welcome Chief Ed John.
Thank you, Duncan. That money is actually, that loan's actually a lot higher now. And it goes to support First Nations who are trying to resolve the land question in this province. And it's unfortunate that First Nations in British Columbia end up having to borrow it, because we know that the resources from governments really comes from the resources of the land. And that's where we find ourselves at this point in time in our efforts of reconciliation, trying to untangle the sordid mess that's there politically and legally. And so I wanted to talk a bit about that, but to really begin by acknowledging Larry, the elder from Musqueam, again for being so gracious and reminding us of the people from your communities who are part of this landscape historically and still today, and to acknowledge the Coast Salish people and the Musqueam First Nations in whose traditional lands that we're so graciously welcomed this morning, and on whose lands we continue to do much of our business together. And so it's important for us as First Nations people always to acknowledge that and whose lands we are. And personally, I want to say that this teaching came from my grandmother. Even though I was going to the next village, not very far away from our community, about 40 miles, on a boat on a lake, she reminded me always before I left, remember how you talk to people at Nakasli. Remember what you say and respect them, the people whose lands you're on. She said this in our language, so be careful what you say and be careful how you say it. And those were the words that always resonated and stuck with me even to this day. And as First Nations people, we acknowledge this because our own history knows and shows that until very recently, we did not see that acknowledgement from the general community of our people's place in this province. So that story of our dear friend Alfie Scow about UBC and the Thunderbird and the pole is a compelling one. The historic nature of the relationship that exists in this institution with First Nations communities. We don't live at the Museum of Anthropology as artifacts. We are real. We are here today. So I want to acknowledge the Law Society today in standing up our friend, our elder, our relative, to acknowledge his tremendous contribution to this province and to this country, but the contribution that he's made to the legal profession and to this institution, and for us, the contribution he's made to our people. You know, there was a time and a place when for Alfie to become a lawyer, he had to give up his place as an Indian person prior to 1960, when the federal government changed its legislation. He had graduated and called to the bar in 1959. He would have been a white man, legally. He would have to be a white man to be a lawyer or a doctor. And when I was asked to present here, I said yes, absolutely. Alfie Scow has been he's been a trailblazer for our peoples, and you've heard that story, so I don't want to repeat that. But all of us knew about Alfie Scow even before we came here, that the fact that he went to law school here and he was a judge. As young people, we understood that, we knew it, and we were proud. So today I heard more about his history and about his relationship with his dear wife, Joan, that long relationship that they've had. And whenever I think of Alfie, he's a trailblazer. He's a complete inspiration to me. And there's always that warm glow in our hearts. Absolutely that warm feeling that we all have when we talk about Alfie and what a tremendous contribution he's made to our peoples. In the footsteps and others of his colleagues, like the late Frank Calder, who was the first member of the Legislative Assembly in this province when Indian people were allowed to vote in provincial elections. That law was changed in 1949. And Len Marchand from Kamloops, the Okanagan, who became a member of Parliament shortly after it was possible for Indian people to become members of Parliament. There's a sad reality, though, is that we have few and far between. This society is still quite closed to our people in many respects, except where we have the numbers and we're able to elect someone from our communities. One year, I recall, there were 15 First Nations Aboriginal candidates in a provincial election, and not one came close to being elected. And you would think that as we try to build these pathways to reconciliation, there's still not that acceptance out there. So I was really, really happy yesterday. This winter, I received a package just in the mail at our office, and it had at least 25, 30 cards, postcards, And they were from a grade 7 students at this little school in Bannerif called Sinkit View. And they were asking questions. Dear